Ayo! Welcome to Roman comedies. That's the worst, like least funny, like ayo! It's comedy. Oh. But this week we're going to talk about Roman comedies. So, when we talk about Roman theatre, what are we talking about? We're talking about roughly 509 BC up to the 3rd century. Um, so we do see examples of it going back as far as the 4th century BC, but really where we kind of talk like the bits that we have like information on and have survived through either mosaic depictions, vase depictions, and some text. We're talking about that period of 509 BC onwards. Um, and if you watched last time with the Greek story of Greek theatre, you'll know that we're there are some going to be some hallmarks. So there is some carry through from Greek theatre into Roman theatre. So Roman theatre still has those mythical heroes that we see in Greece. But we do also see more of an introduction of a political storyline. So in Greece, they talk about they have some kind of plays that are about cities falling and war. Some theatre traditions in Rome kind of take that and run with it, and even link into like how Rome transitioned from being a monarchy to a republic. So we see theatre as being used to help spread information about what's happening with the governing of the country. And that journey into Rome becoming a republic. So Roman theatre really is also still about spectacle, but it also becomes a bit more about crowd pleasing as well. So in Rome, like the tragedies are still there, they still exist, of course, but now we see comedies becoming much more popular. And of the theatre that survives to the day, I would say that Roman comedies are one of the hallmarks of like this period of history. And it still has its roots in religion. So if we take an example of like there was a plague in 364 BC, and the citizens then, in order to appease the gods, started to do plays more in their kind of alongside other forms of worship and festivals, which, just as a sidebar, there is something incredibly indomitable and inspiring. This is one of the reasons I love theatre, right? Is because it's like people's response to crisis is, okay, we need to get together and like tell a really good story because people's spirits need uplifting, and we need to appease the gods. And what better way than like let's play pretend. Like the theatre kids of Rome. My hat's off to you of what going, I think what we need here is some costumes. We've just had a really nasty plague. I think we need some costumes and a bit of dancing and a bit of music, and then let's like entertain the masses. So yeah, so we're in this place of like crowd pleasing, and we also see like political parody as well. So different types of comedy start to come out. um so we see like there was that you have like Atellan farces, which probably now deeply problematic. I imagine were kind of problematic at the day, but they're all comedies based on like um very ethnically specific like stereotypes basically. So we see that begin to happen in Rome, which like classic empire move. Let's have some like racially offensive stereotypes. And then we also see some political parodies in the Phylaces plays as well. So we're kind of like we're starting to kind of get more critical about society in Roman theatre. And we also, and so I mentioned last time that the Romans took the old comedy of the Greeks. So what happened was that we see a rebirth of old comedies, as Roman scholars actually start to discover vases depicting Greek comedies. They start to rewrite and rework these comedies, and create the Roman comedy. So you see that kind of like reference as well, which coincidentally is exactly what happens in the 18th century with the neoclassicism movement. So it just like goes to show history works in circles. But in neoclassicism we get this kind of return to like Roman archetypes because we start to do more archaeology in certain areas, and the Romans were doing that themselves. So this, like, Romans inspired us to do that, but the Romans were doing that themselves with the ancient Greeks. Who were 200 years before them. So there's interest, you know, histories in circles. And continuing on from the Greeks as well, we see plays and theatres happen during big festivals. So the spaces where they're held are large amphitheatre like. So everyone will know the Colosseum is a good example of this. But the difference here to the Greek spaces is that Greek were dedicated spaces for theatre. These Roman theatres were spaces for entertainment in general, and actually plays and theatre were probably the least popular among the people of these entertainments. So you would have also had things like circuses and the gladiatorial fighting events, and, you know, like pit fighting with animals. So what happens to theatre technology in this period is that we start to see stages and scenery built on wooden like the flat pack gets the theatre flat pack gets invented in ancient Rome because they were sharing spaces with gladiatorial events. They had to be able to dismantle all of the staging at the end of a performance and get it out so that the gladiators could get in. So for anyone who's worked in a theatre, the get out is also invented during ancient Rome, and the get out is like the most stressful the most stressful event in any like off the West End production where you're in like the top room of a pub. It's just like you got to get out so that they can get a wedding in the next hour. So yeah, so that's how we see like a changes in theatres. But we also start to see, so we had some of the archetype, you have some of the hero archetypes. Greece play around with them a little bit. You have certain conventions like the chorus are established, but the Romans take the archetype and they go like yes and to the max. So we see the introduction, like the early, this is like the pre-Commedia dell'arte archetypes, and I think, you know, Rome being in Italy, I think it's like Commedia dell'arte is a natural progression of these Roman archetypes that you see in the Roman comedies. So we have characters like the Adolescents, which is like the adolescent. And here I've chosen Prince Philip from Sleeping Beauty as an example, because I think Disney, out of all of the films of my childhood, I feel like Disney best embodies the archetypes of like classic theatre. So we have like the adolescent was usually like a young man. We're talking like late teens, 20s, early 20s, and he is going to at some point during the play fall in love with a prostitute or a slave. And then later that woman is revealed to actually be like a freeborn woman, or she's freed from her position, and then is like available for marriage. So it's like secret Disney princess vibes is what's happening. As well as like the Adolescents, you also have the pseudolos servus. So that's like the clever slave, the clever servant character, who tries to help your like the hero, and their job is to shield the hero from conflict or to somehow solve their problems in the play. So, you know, like the hero can't get, like, he can't go to see the woman he loves. The clever servant comes in with some sort of like disguise or something to help him like infiltrate the brothel. That's the vibe. And then you also have like the Senex, who is the father of the Adolescents, and the Senex is like usually concerned with the relationship with his son in the play, so his job is to be the dad. But sometimes he also like falls in love with the same woman, or is trying to have some sort of affair. Like, he's usually very romantically unfaithful to his wife, so not the best of role models. But he'll never end up with the secret princess, right? Because he always his wife will come and track him down and then drag him off stage and is furious with him. You also have the Leno, who is like the pimp slash slave dealer in the story. They tend to be very immoral, but will operate within the letter of Roman law. So there's a kind of like, I think, early satirical lens you see through the Leno. Like they're kind of like the critique, the comedy critique of Roman law. And like, despite being immoral and terrible as a character, usually end up getting paid for their services. So he doesn't, like, because he's operating within the law, he still gets a paycheck. And then you have one of my favorite characters, which is like the Miles Glorious. So they're like an arrogant soldier type derived from like the braggart heroes of Greek comedy. They're like the kind of like pastiche send up of the Greek heroes. And the title is actually taken from a play by Platus. And these guys are usually really gullible. Sometimes they're quite cowardly, but they're very, very boastful. Like, I think the best the best modern equivalent for me is Gaston. Like, 100%. Gaston is the Miles Glorious. He is the yeah, he is that guy. He's like all mouth, no trousers. Of the ancient Roman world is Gaston. Also, coincidentally, I do think that Miles Glorious is the perfect name for like a paladin in D&D who's just like not very good at their job. So yeah, that might be popping up at some point as NPC. But yeah, Miles Glorious, the braggart paladin. And then you also have like the Parasitus, so the parasite character, who is like Gaston's little buddy. So they usually are like hanging out with the Miles Glorious and work purely for their own gain. Like they're there for their next meal more than anything. And then you have the Matrona. So the Matrona is always the mother of the hero. And genuinely, her job is to be a lovely mother and a really good mother and support her son, and also to stop her husband from having affairs. So, which is incredibly annoying by modern standards, because it's just like even then women are being held responsible for decisions men make with their dicks. It's like since 509 BC. So you have the Matrona. That's her job, is to be a good mum and to try and stop her husband running off and having an affair. And then you also have the Virgo, and you'll know if you're like a astrology person. The Virgo is the secret princess. She's the love interest. Her main job is to basically be very pretty on stage. Sometimes they don't even speak that often, and actually aren't even on stage for much of the play. They're often talked about rather than seen, which is also annoying. So Roman theatre, there are no parts for women really. But she also, like, the Virgo always becomes eligible for marriage once she is either like freed from her status as being a slave, or revealed to have been like a secret free woman all along. So I think that's Rome. They're operating firmly within tropes in terms of their theatre, and they're really like bedding down into kind of like they've got a formula that they're following for comedy. And what I think is interesting about these archetypes is they show us something about like Rome's idealized society and family structure. So they tell us about like what was acceptable, what wasn't acceptable. Slavery is fine for fodder, for comedy fodder, because slavery is everywhere. But there is a clear distinction between a slave and a free person. Like a slave can't be the hero. A slave can't be the eligible woman. It's only after their status as a slave is somehow thwarted that these people can then become like the heroes, the good guys. And I think some of that is still recognizable in our stories today, like the Gaston, like the Prince Philip, like Aurora being a secret princess in the forest. And it's what theatre becomes in terms of commedia dell'arte later on in Italy. because all theatre is like an evolution and a reflection on our human story. So it kind of evolves with us, and it also goes in circles just like our history. So seeing those sorts of links, I always think is kind of cool. That's why I get all nerdy and excited about it. Anyway, so moving on, we're going to leap like way forward for the next episode and go into the 15th century AD. Oh no, the 5th century AD, because I'm gonna go medieval on your ass. Hell yeah! See you later. Bye.